Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters, for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. I'm your host and fractional CMO, Robert Mendelson, here in beautiful Montreal. And joining us today from just down the street in Pickering, Ontario, is Debbie Carkner. Debbie's an AI growth transformation leader, a customer and employee experience digital strategist, and a former managing director and partner at Accenture. Today's episode, powered by the fractionalproscanada.ca directory. Scaling a business in Canada is hard enough without the high price tag of a full-time C-suite hire. Most CEOs I'm talking to need high-level strategy to break through, but they don't want the overhead, the long-term risk, or the 6-month recruiting cycle. When they ask for a shortcut, I send them over to the fractionalproscanada.ca directory. It's the curated hub for vetted, high-tier fractional talent like Debbie, experts who step in, find the gaps, and deliver ROI from day one. Instead of digging through generic job boards, savvy leaders go where the specialists are already gathered. Business leaders, find your next strategic partner on the directory at fractionalproscanada.ca. Debbie, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Robert. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. So your current title on your LinkedIn profile says Fractional Leadership Advisor. And I wonder, can you break that down for us? What does exactly that mean? What types of clients are you working with? What types of mandates are you working on?
Absolutely. So, um, leadership facilitation is really around working with clients, and I've gone from startups to some of the largest in the world, helping them to reimagine how they're going to tackle problems. That's the easiest way to explain it. So, from a startup point of view, the conversations may be, um, Deb, I want to uh, get my business into Accenture. How do I do that? And I was like, well, what's your exit strategy? And they're like, exit strategy? I'm trying to enter. And I'm like, yes, but when you go into a company like Accenture, you need to know whether your plan is to sell in 5 years or to be acquired, or that you're going to try and make it multi-generational. That will then shape the leadership conversations we have around your book of business. To other organizations that are, well-established Fortune 500, and they're trying to figure out potentially, how do I do AI automation? Where is the biggest impact? What are the biggest concerns am I going to have? This thing called governance. What are my people going to react to? All of those types of conversations are totally on board. And from a facilitation point of view, it's really using a lot of design thinking methodologies and really being able to uncover through that conversation and through journeys and interviews of being able to map out what that new experience might look like. And typically what we find, it's not the strategy, it's the people. And it's the people that will either make or break a project's success, which I'm sure you've already experienced in your own life too.
Never. No, never.
And I need to talk
First
to
time
you
I hear
more.
of that. All right. So there's a pretty wide spectrum of what you do, which is great. And we're going to dig into that. But I always like going back and looking at where my guests started their careers, because it often reveals some kind of hidden superpower. So in your case, we go way back to the mid-90s. You were an account manager in business development at the CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, managing traditional client accounts. And then we fast forward a whole bunch of decades, Deb, and you were managing director and partner at Accenture, presenting cutting-edge generative AI marketing apps to global CMOs at the Cannes Festival. So this is quite a journey from where you were to where you got to, an incredible contrast. Before we go down the rabbit holes of tech and AI and the metaverse, which I want to talk about as well. What did that early pure relationship building kind of grind period of your early career teach you about how corporate decision makers actually think today, even still today?
So some things don't change, right? In fact, they say the more things change, the more things stay the same. So when I started at CMHC, the first project I started with was in IT. I was actually a developer. And um, I always figured that you have to understand the technical side in order to be able to do the marketing and business side. And so it was jump in both feet, right? But what I found is that it's really the people. And so the biz dev was understanding how to help banks um, grow their mortgage back business. So all of the CMHC insured business was really around talking to them in their language and branding into their colors so that their sales teams and their personal banking people could have all of the materials that they needed about CMHC on their desk because they weren't allowed anything that wasn't branded. So we figured out how to actually talk to the client in their terms. When I was working at CMHC, there was a gentleman who did the rent geared to income. And so he would spend months all summer long from like 7 until 10, very dedicated in trying to make sure that every person got the right, whatever their new rate was going to be for their rent. And I looked at it and I said, we could actually automate that, thinking I was doing him a big favor, right? Oh, he said, that would be great. I don't then have to work my entire weekends on this project. Then so we went through all the appropriate steps of, requirement gathering and understanding what the goals were. And he would have signed off on each process along the way. And on the day it went live, I said, watch this. And I pressed go. And he was fascinated until he realized an hour and a half later, his entire 3 month, 3.5 month project was now done. And then he said, oh, I don't think this will work for me. And it was because he no longer felt connected to the work. And he was concerned that his work might actually no longer be needed for him to be in part of his role. And so the first thing I learned early in my career is that it's all about people, people's mindsets. I want it, but I don't necessarily understand what I want, or I need to be able to pivot in order to be able to make sure that whatever's being delivered really meets the needs of both the client and the um, the marketplace. So it's all about people, and changing that mindset was. I was so devastated when this gentleman said, "Well, I can't use this." Like, I just saved you all this time so you can do other things, and but I failed to really understand the human connection he had with that part of his job.
Now, all this happened in the 90s, is that right?
It did.
Okay, now that really interesting because a lot of what you said sounds very familiar to what's happening these days, 30 odd years later, with, of course, AI now being the platform that's automating. So, it's incredible. Like you said, things don't change. The more they change, the more they stay the same. It's
Yeah.
amazing. You could have told the same story exactly and said this just happened a couple of months ago. It would have been right on, same relevance, right? Incredible. And we're gonna talk about that. So how do you what do you do? What did you do and what do you do today when you get that reaction from somebody and they feel threatened? Off the first reaction in the first 10 seconds is like, "Well, that's cool." And then the next reaction is, "Oh my god, you just replaced me. I'm out of a job." What do you say to
Yeah.
that?
So it's a great question. And ironically, I started going back because we're all like, oh, AI is going to displace people. 50% of all the major AI initiatives are expected to fail. We just don't know which 50%. Just like when I was in CO and as a CMO, 50% of your marketing works, 50% doesn't. We seem to really struggle with this 50% number. If you look at Fortune 500 companies from when it started in 1955, only 49 of those companies remain. 49 out of 500. Now, some of them might still be alive, but they're no longer generating enough revenue. Some have gone through mergers and acquisitions. So, essence of them might be there, but they themselves are no longer part of Fortune 500. And so when you start looking at AI, there was a really good report that ACL Tech Study just came out with. And the Kraft CIO says there's three business metrics that matter. It doesn't matter what company you're in, it's revenue, cost, and risk. Sounds simple. And AI says it's going to be experience focused and, very driven to helping transform people from operational efficiency to employee productivity and automating complex workflows. And all the people have to do is tell the system how it works. But what we forgot is as soon as we do that, it's the people that matter and it's their mindset of transformation of why am I going to automate myself out of a job that will ultimately cause failure? And it's not just with AI. It's been all the way through the studies of Fortune 500 companies is this mindset shift that we often miss. And so the first thing that talk to people about is really around not just the cost and risk side, because that's important, but what about the new mindset shift of growth? And even in the study today, under 40% of all companies that are now embracing AI are looking at how to make it better for business decision making or enhancing product and offering or creating net new revenue streams. The companies that are going to be successful are going to figure out how to do that along with cost savings and operational efficiencies. What that means for their employees is that there's a new opportunity for them to do cool and exciting things. We've talked about this before, Robert, where when you build out your org chart, you build out your org chart with your people and with their assistant. Wouldn't it be cool if you could have an assistant to do all the grunt work, right? It's not what you want to do, but the brain power of where you think you could take something is really where the interest is. And so, as a facilitator of looking at these journeys, it's about understanding what the opportunity is for growth that will also achieve that efficiency and reduce risk. Most importantly, it's about understanding people and what makes them tick, what makes them sabotage projects intentionally, unintentionally, and what makes them embrace. So that 50% that are going to be successful aren't because of the tools and they aren't because of the strategy. It's going to be around how that organization got their people to buy in and really embrace that change. And that's what I do.
Yeah, the buy-in is so important, and I've heard so many examples of that. I think one of the most under or overlooked ways to start socializing AI, and tell me if you agree or not, is like your example of the org chart, and imagine every employee now has an AI assistant or whatever you want to call that AI piece that is now theirs to work with and help them. And ask the employee, and every employee can do this, right? Make a list of everything you do on a daily or weekly basis, two columns, what things you like doing, things you don't like doing. Every single employee, even you and me, can make that list. There's always things we do that we don't like doing. And
Yeah.
now look at that list of in the don't like column, and now ask the question, which of these things can AI do for me? And isn't that the best or one of the best starting points to get an employee excited about how AI can take all this stuff they hate off their plate and leave them room to do more of the stuff they like and even stuff they never thought they'd be able to do by leveraging the power of AI?
Absolutely. So, we run a CMO community, group of former Accenture managing directors, and we often have this conversation with these, few hundred CMOs, and the ones that are really embracing how to engage the people. And they're like, we're not actually losing people, we're adding people. We're getting rid of all of the grunt work, is how I call it, and empowering people to really do these transformations, these journeys of new experiences. I remember a couple of years ago when came back from Cannes, and all of our designs were around the marketing experience, right? Getting that collective vision and not getting people. I've spent, 2 months building this for someone to reject it. We would have everything built within 2 hours. So now there was no love with any of it. And you had a really great dialogue with all the different stakeholder groups, all the way up, if you needed to the CEO for permission, because you could touch and feel and see. That's huge for an executive team that's looking at risk to be able to say, yes, that fits with our brand. And it allowed everybody to know what their marching orders were going to be. I had a presentation done on what was supposed to be a marketing campaign, and it was for an apparel company. And it happens to be an apparel company that I love. And so she was showing me this, campaign, and I'm like, "Where's that product? I want that product." She goes, "Oh, I just had AI like flip something for me." And I'm like, "This is not about the campaign. No one cares about the campaign, but you have just stumbled upon how to do product creation. And then we could do crowdsourcing and we could get everybody involved. And then that apparel will know, ah, I should go and source for this type of look and feel because there's already a bent up demand for that product." So it was changing that mind shift from, oh, this is just a marketing campaign. And I said, never sell a product that you don't have the ability to sell because it's frustration. And then the client feels a lack of trust because I can't buy that product because it physically doesn't exist, but it's what I want. And now everything else won't be nearly as fun because I don't get what I want. And so, this ability to use AI in really creative ways is really where the heart and soul of these transformations will be happening.
I want to turn to your transition to going fractional. You spent quite a few years with Accenture climbing to the highest levels. And then January 2024, there's a career break that you took. It shows 6 months career break for transition. You reemerged 6 months later as a fractional leadership advisor. Take us through that 6 month window. What was happening during that reflection period? What was the catalyst, if there was one, that made you decide to step away from the big enterprise and go the fractional route?
Sure. It's taken a while to be able to articulate this story, but it starts with my mom died of COVID.
Hmm.
And my husband said to me, if you were to die in 5 years, which is pretty like, whoa, if you were to die in 5 years, is this what you want to do? And I said, no. He said, well, if you know that that's not what you want to do, then what is it that you want to do? I have no idea. I love what I do, but I don't want to do it anymore. And then I left. And then I decided that I was addicted to my computer. I worked 7 days a week. I called it fun. It is fun. I love everything that I do about it. But the rest of my body was not quite aligned with, this brain that's like, well, we'll just go and study this and we'll do this and we'll focus on that. And there's this other new thing that you could learn. And so I turned off my computer and I got on a on a plane, and I went to Mexico. And I walked beaches for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the only metric that I was allowed to use, I didn't have a computer, I just had a phone, was and a smartwatch, was to track whether it was better to walk 10,000 steps faster or 20,000 steps longer in order to figure out what was the best DNA for my body. And then my day was structured around these massive walks that had to be completed before 9 because I was still very much into, a very solid routine that then was into yoga, and then it was into um, some kind of water therapy. So it was all outdoors. It was all very physical as the rest of me started to help my brain decompress. Some ways maybe decompose too, but decompress is really the intent, right? And it took a long time before changing habits.
So, COVID gives you a kind of like reality check reset. You're walking beaches in Mexico for a few weeks, focused just on steps, how many steps you're doing, and if it's better to walk fewer steps faster or more steps slower. Take us back to that and tell us where that ended up.
Sure. So I still walk. And what it really did is it really gave me a structure to focus on well-being and to allow my brain to disengage while the rest of my body caught up. And so the ability to walk, they always say when you are, trying to figure out the next stage of life or problem or whatever it is you're going through, walking is the best solution. And I laughed because then I thought I'd be walking for 24 hours a day, but I actually was able to put it into more of a routine and balancing that with, yoga and water therapies and really being able to um, say yes to the passions that I really wanted to pursue and know that I could also say no if they weren't fulfilling. So not this obligation to please everyone else. I put myself in third person as the client because the one thing I understand is how to do client service. And so I talk about me in third party, which sounds very odd. But by doing the scheduling of this very difficult client who was very demanding, allowed me to make sure that I delivered. I knew I had to walk. I knew I had to go to the gym. I knew I had to do things that would help me become, stronger mentally, physically. And and so the program of scheduling every week was a routine from all of my career. And the beauty of having that is it gave me a new sense of focus. I used to be a competitive athlete. So this ability to have that rigor around a discipline to get things done was really important to me. The travel, we went to Africa, so we did bucket list stuff and really cool adventures that when I was working full time, I would have pushed off. And now it was bring them forward. Look at different opportunities and really have that open mindset to pursue those passions. And one of the passions is we have what I would call a side hustle of an Airbnb. And the Airbnb is now rated as, I don't know, top one in Airbnb community. And so they've asked if I can help others trying to figure out how to be, good at being an Airbnb, which is kind of an honor. But it's that ability to explore and be held accountable, right? So now when you're in each of these different projects, the accountability shifts to you. There is no one that you can blame or hide behind. It's all about you. And so that turning off a computer, turning on the computer for the first time after 6 months of not having it, I didn't know if I was going to be able to trust that I wouldn't go back to my habits of 12, 14-hour days. But the balance of all the other parts that I had built into my life now allowed me to have that ability to mix and match. And so it started to say, you've earned the ability to go back because you've lived it and be able to say, I know what I need for my brain to feel fulfilled. I know what my body needs for it to be fulfilled so that I have a yin and a yang that are kind of equal. And so fractional, and I really struggled with what do I want to do next, right? Because the phone after I left was like, well, we've got all these full-time jobs for you. I was like not gone 24 hours and it was like, I can barely breathe. I don't think I want that extra pressure right now. I need If I'm going to invest in me, I need to do it now. And now that I'm looking, what I found is each time I looked at a full-time role, it just felt like maybe it was not going to align with everything else that I've built in my life. And fractional gives me that opportunity to really be present for whichever client I'm dealing with and to deliver great value to them, but then to be able to take other time to do another passion and to be able to continue to really focus on being balanced. And I think that's probably the greatest thing that I'm finding from fractional. It's still scary. It's still sometimes, you're changing your identity of who you were to what you've become and to where you're going to go. But the fractional side and being able to meet so many different people and so many different audiences and groups of different sizes allows me to really feel alive. So that's what I've been doing.
Your story is quite remarkable if you think of it in the context that it took just 6 months to reset, habits that had formed and you were living for decades. It's a
Yeah.
relatively short period of time to be able to achieve, pretty much a reset and the awareness and really, take an exit off that highway you'd been on for so long and never go back to that highway. It's just quite remarkable.
Thanks. As I said, she's a very difficult client and had big expectations and a timeline to be able to prove that you need to be able to get back in the world. You can't escape, but you need time in order to be able to grow, reflect, and be ready for whatever the next adventure is.
Yeah, and I think that's it's an example of a lesson that I think everybody can take something from, whether it's you're having a bad day and you need to take a couple of hours to reset on going for a walk, or it's a lifetime that you need to reset and everything in between. It is possible to do when we find ourselves sometimes so hopeless and like, oh, I've been doing this for so long. It's like a sunken cost fallacy. It's like there's no turning back now. But yes, there is. It's an inspiring story. And the other thing I love about it is you talked about walking, and that's something that I have found is a practice that I try to incorporate into every single day. I find when I go for a walk and I'm not listening, earbuds are out. If I have anything, maybe it's music, but it's not a podcast. If it is, of course, it's the Fractional Pros Canada podcast, but otherwise it's going out for a walk and just kind of letting whatever is going to flow into my mind, out of my mind. And within minutes, I just find I'm having these realizations and these things that have been bugging me. All of a sudden I have this thought of what to do next. It's an incredible, easy therapy that sounds like it worked for you too. And I love walking on beaches too. I don't think there's anything better than that. So I can definitely
No,
relate.
nothing better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Walking gives you clarity, and it's truly a gift, and it doesn't cost anything except the willingness to put on something on your feet to be able to get out the door.
Right. By the way, where's your Airbnb? Is it in Pickering?
No, it's up on Balsam Lake in the Kawarthas.
Okay. I figured it's probably somewhere a little bit more scenic than Pickering.
Yes, it's right on the water. It's a beautiful escape.
Excellent. So you go fractional, and what have you found to be your biggest, maybe most unexpected challenges as you started to build that business and, I guess in a sense, productize all that enterprise expertise that you had accumulated and transfer that to something you could package to smaller companies?
Yeah, and not even smaller companies. It's all different size. Some are not for profit, some are startups, some are still large organizations where it's no change from before. The biggest change is actually selling me as its own entity rather than I come as an MD from Accenture, which gives you a very 780,000 people that work there, right? And $60 billion, it gives you instant credibility. Now you're a solo, you're still the same person, but it's how do you package that story for people to still know that you have that capability and that skill set? That was probably the turning off the corporate hat and turning on and embracing the solopreneur hat was probably the hardest thing, was saying goodbye and owning that goodbye. And it doesn't mean it's forever. Maybe something will come along. But right now, what I'm finding is embracing this fractional type of journey is rewarding. It takes a lot of time to be able to do it well. You have different controls, right? So facilitation is a craft. It's really around storytelling and the ability to create that safe environment so that you can create a team that really believes that they're going to be able to achieve. And in fractional, it also means that typically, as the advisor and the facilitator, I'm there for a very fixed period of time. And then they move on without me. And for me, moving on without me being part of it was an adjustment, right? Because usually you're the champion making things happen so that it gets to life. And here you're really more of the early cheerleader. So if you think of a football game, you're kind of like getting the stage all excited, but you're not there for the championship win, except in the bleachers watching and feeling that sense of accomplishment. And so that mindset, that mind shift for me was probably the hardest thing.
And any takeaways, lessons, tips, hacks you could share with other fractionals who are struggling with that right now?
Take your time, breathe, and own it.
And that's good advice as well for a lot of people who are in corporate and kind of like you get to a point where it's like, I'm done with this corporate thing. I've been there, done that. I want to go out on my own. I want to choose my own clients. I want to take back and own my time. But how the heck am I going to do it? Because it's seems like such a radical transition, and it is. So some great advice on how to smooth over that transition.
So if I can just add one thing there, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
One of my fractional roles is becoming an executive coach. I used to do a lot of coaching within my corporate world. And one of my former colleagues, she's a PhD, and she's built this program called Claristrat that allows you to really go through and figure out that transition. And so when she asked as one of her first cohorts, I'm like, sure, I'll do it because I was in my moment of saying yes and I was going to help a friend. The reality is that part of where I've gone from my growth is because that course actually was the thing that I learned more from it than from all of the, I've been to 11 universities. I've taken hundreds and hundreds of courses. It was the one course that has really stuck. And now I'm, starting to open up faculty on that side. But if that transition gets you stuck, you know that you're not where you need to be and you're not quite sure. They talk about it as, in a systemic point of view, that you're now in a state of flux, except you might not know that you're in that state of flux. And so this program really allows us to go through and help that transition. And that is probably, as I say, when I thought I was helping her to get it certified, it really became more of a tool that allowed me to really finish off that transition. And so sometimes you just need a helping hand.
How have you dealt with the other big transition to going fractional, which is now you got to do your own biz dev. You got to fill that pipeline with clients, potential clients, prospects, spend some time chasing after them, et cetera, et cetera. What does that look like for you, and how have you figured out how to handle that?
So I'm still working on that. First, it was really around what was the offering that I felt most authentic offering that would be something that is in demand and isn't going to have an impact on a client being able to choose, right? If they need to do a transformation, it's easy to bring someone in very quickly. So you don't have to hire this, 6 months of trying to find the right people. There's a few of us out there that actually do a really good job of that. And you just have to retain for a short period of time. So it's the messaging around that and then being able to storytell around common themes of where we see people having challenges and then being able to start having those conversations And I didn't go big and broad with storytelling in every single channel. I wanted to make sure that it felt right, that I had the ability to course correct before announcing to, look at me. That's not my style. My style is really around how do I add value and who is it that I'm going to add the most value to? And that voice became stronger as my commitment to doing the things that I'm really most passionate about. And it really is around that helping, mindset shifts. It doesn't matter whether it's an Airbnb, whether it's a startup, whether it's a Fortune 500, whether it's AI, or whether it's someone that's going through a career transition. At the end of the day, it's all about a person, people. And by buying into that, it felt whole inside me. I felt like I've lived this journey. I can help you through the same journey. And there's lots of different tenets that it can go down. And so that sharing of the story, and today, being able to participate in your podcast has been an absolute delight. And so what we're finding now is going through, instead of just building one-on-one through my own community, is really going out to many other communities and saying, how can I help? It's the easiest thing, because I didn't know that I could help you with your podcast until I said, how can I help? And you said, the best way I can help you is to join my podcast. The how I can help is probably my most important sales technique that I'm finding that opens more doors.
Nice. Appreciate that. That's beautiful. Let's go back to when you were at Accenture in the business world. I'm curious how many of your clients, or how many clients in general, did you see were using fractionals? And knowing what you know now about being a fractional yourself, do you look back and kind of revisit those in the rearview mirror and say, that client should have really hired a fractional for that role?
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it that way. Partially because Accenture kind of, I think in some ways in its consulting hat, often assumes that extra layer of support for our clients. And we help guide, right? So we know that our tenure is not typically to stay there forever. And sometimes we would have people that were coming on where it was a special project where the client was hiring someone. And we would ask whether that was, a full-time role for the long haul, or whether it was a skill set that they might need on their side that would augment all the work that the groups were doing collectively. Because we're dealing with, at Accenture, the Fortune 500 organizations are not for profit. We're sometimes a little different. Usually they were going full time, but you would see sometimes fractional roles opening up with special projects that they had where they weren't sure that it was going to be a long-term hire. And then in order to validate the skill sets, Accenture would be part of that evaluation to make sure there was a good fit.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let's go back to talking a little bit more about AI and aligning it with a client's actual corporate objectives, internal ROI expectations. If I'm a CEO and my team comes to me and says, "Hey, boss, we believe that this AI initiative would be great. Let's spend some money on it. Let's do it." What are some of the questions that I should be asking my team to validate if they've really thought that AI initiative through properly, or if this is shiny object syndrome? They're like, "Oh, we do this, and we're gonna 10x within a week."
Yeah. So we had that not just with AI, but with every single net new shiny object and tool that came out. And I don't think that will ever change. I think, human nature is curiosity. And if you're on a team, you're always looking to upgrade your skills. So that ability to really determine whether it's an ROI type project from a CEO point of view, it's really important. We would look first at conversations around governance, because as the CEO, your risk is really important. And so where is, and one of the biggest problems is data, right? That everybody knows that some people have better quality data than others, and AI leverages data. So the CEO, from a governance point of view, would have them look at the quality of the data so that people call it closed box. I actually had someone tell me that it's more like a glass box. You want to be able to see everything that's going in so that you have confidence in what's coming out. Because when you're using AI, it kind of goes, I'm thinking, would you like me to think for, 5 seconds or a minute? And you're like, well, I'll choose the minute because this is really important. But the reality is that I don't know whether the 5-second thought process would have been better than the 1-minute thought process. But I do know that my risk is real. And so this ability to understand the quality of the data going in and what the expected outcome is really important. So I need to really understand governance. I need to understand it from a security point of view. I need to understand it from, at one point when Google Home and, Alexa were coming out, people would say, really goofy things, right? How do you bury a dead body in the backyard? Well, that's probably not something that anybody from a CEO point wants their call center to be able to provide equally as like outrageous responses. So you want to make sure that in your governance that you're looking at, does it reflect the population of who we serve? Is it going to be trustworthy and empathetic? That doesn't mean that I'm going to say yes to everything, but it does mean that I'm not just looking for a couple of keywords, that I actually have a almost parallel system running for a period of time to make sure that when the cookie answers come out, that they don't get to the client. So what's that kind of governance and control that's going to happen? Can I trust the data going in to be able to reflect the quality of the brand coming out? We see that with financial institutions where the governance and risk and compliance are huge, and there's a lot of extra shareholder value if you do it wrong, because for sure you're going to be on the front news. Google's had those problems too, right? So it's not a far stretch for the CEO of any organization to be asking those kinds of questions. I think one of the other areas that they really explore is what's the full scope or potential of the project. If it's just around operational efficiencies or productivity, is that enough for me to invest based on all the other projects that the team has already identified and is part of our strategic plan? Is there something there that we could actually augment AI into rather than replacing? Now, having said that, if one of them is really around growth that helps you to achieve cost and reduce risk, then that type of project, because it hits all of the 3 big business metrics, really does warrant a bigger conversation. And it's not just the CEO that has to have that buy-in. It's the leadership group. And so, putting that presentation together and being able to address a few key things allows decision makers very quickly to make sure. And then what happens is the team making the proposal feels the door is open and there's a format and a structure. And Accenture was really cool about driving that type of innovation. And it could come from anywhere in the organization. It's something that I really loved about it. But it also went through the rigor of making sure that it didn't just get a gold stamp without making sure that there was some overall governance. So those would be right off the bat the things that I would guide any CEO on thinking about. And the last is what the competition is doing, right? Not that you want to be a me too, but if you're the last one in, and there can be reasons for that, then you want to make sure that you're not just a me too following, but you're really innovating on, if you look at cars, a Japanese car years ago was the last thing you wanted to buy because they were new at it. They were buying American cars. Nowadays, a Japanese car is highly desirable because they learned how to innovate and get ahead. And so when you're in your assessment, it's not whether you're last or first. It's really around, does it fit your brand and is it a differentiator that drives risk, reduces risk, drives revenue, and hopefully reduces cost.
Yeah, you make me think of back in the day, and it's probably 15 or 20 years ago, where Kia, the car company, was you don't want a Kia. They're awful. They're terrible cars. Today, I mean, not everybody,
Lots of people
Kia's
love
good
a Kia,
car.
right?
It's
It's a great, reliable
yeah,
car. They have
yeah.
better warranties, but they figured out where they were going to differentiate. And then they stood by that as their brand promise. And that's, for me, the storytelling of other companies. So you don't want to be a me too. You do want to make sure that, you know, you're a client first brand. And what is that differentiation that you're going to bring to the table using AI or any other tool for that matter that will really engage?
Yeah, I remember reading the story about them and Hyundai as well. I believe they literally had a direct pipeline of customer feedback right to the R&D team. So they
Yeah.
get, customer feedback saying, car is great, but, right? And then they started paying attention to what was after the but. I wish that, making it up, right? That the flicker when I turn right, that it didn't flash as often. R&D's right on it. They're fixing that, rolling it
Yeah.
out as a new feature in the next car, like right away. Great,
The
great.
whole voice of customer research. So part of when I do facilitation, that is a core part, right? Sometimes we think going faster. I had one client in utilities, and when they would get an issue, they would immediately want to get it to the client, like within 24 hours, but it was spooking out the client because it was too fast. So the feedback was, thanks for letting us know, but now we're scared to live in our house. And so they said, if you could have given us, 72 hours, all would be good. And so we switched it. We made it slower rather than faster. And the CSAT scores, the client satisfaction scores, went up way beyond anybody's expectations, all because you listened to the customer. And sometimes what you think is really important may not resonate exactly the same way with the client or with the customer. So it's really important that you're always listening to that stakeholder group that can help shape, and voice of customer research and having it directly to me is one of those integral parts of doing any kind of design thinking and real strategy type work.
The number one reason why it fails. Talk to us about what you've learned about that over the years.
So the number one reason that projects fail, and as we talked about earlier, this is not AI. This is every single generation has its claim of an AI-esque type experience, right? Everybody will say that they had the best strategy, that they had, made all the appropriate investments. But what they didn't understand was the human architecture, the behavior and trust and willingness of the people that were going to do that work. And by helping each human being to understand how to work and think differently so that, it allows them to feel heard. It allows them to feel like they belong. It allows them to have a safe environment when it's created where they don't feel blame, right? If something goes wrong, who broke it? Well, that's not really a good answer, right? It's because now no one wants to do it because you're afraid that you're going to get blamed. Versus, like, we always had a mandate of fail forward fast or fail fast forward. But it was about failing is an integral part of growth. I can tell that when I took my 6 months off. That reflection allowed me to become more of what I wanted to be. It wasn't a failure as much as it was a growth. In my marketing days, I remember a campaign that was supposed to go out on Boxing Day went out on the 24th instead because they had
Ouch.
screwed up. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me because the one line we had said is this campaign doesn't start until December 26th. But on Christmas Day, people were shopping like crazy for the product. That the numbers went off the hook. It was a big retailer. And it was their only sale of the year. And so by the time it was all the anticipation, and then the buying went crazy right at 12:01. So it wasn't a failure. It was actually the best thing. And now you watch people in lots of retail coming soon, or it's, well, that wasn't part of the norm then. It was kind of a oopsie that instead of focusing on the blame, we focused on the learning. And so that fail mentality of creating a safe space where you can try things is really, fundamental of AI. AI is going to fail at a lot of things. It's going to really fail really quickly. When they talk about, failure in these Fortune 500 companies, it used to take 60 years to fail. So you had some time to think about, your plan and course correct. In the 2020 range, they're saying it's 15 to 20 years. Well, now that you've got AI, it's probably going to be in the 5 to 8 years. So you don't have a whole lot of time to make everything perfect. The 5-year business plan is probably, a little bit of a pipe dream. But the ability to pivot around where you want your values to be is a lifetime goal, right? So what you're measuring when you're looking at these strategies and being able to pivot quickly and efficiently and on brand with purpose, that never goes out of style.
I'm surprised that it's as long as 5 to 8 years that you're saying with AI. I was expecting
I'm
you to say,
hoping, right?
I was expecting you to say 5 to 8 minutes. I'm like, AI can just simulate and model all the different scenarios within a couple minutes and tell you, here's your risk of failure. Here's what, these are the different levers and this is what you need to watch out for. It's like, here's where the landmines are. Now just go avoid them or go get rid of them.
But I do find, I was doing a proposal or a facilitation for a client a couple of weeks ago, and ChatGPT, and I love ChatGPT. I mean, I use lots of different tools, but it's like, would you like me to build a deck for you? I'm like, sure. Can you make it look like Accenture? Because I kind of know what Accenture decks look like. Absolutely, I can do that. I waited my 4 minutes because I added the extra time just to make sure it had lots of time to get it right. And I looked at it and I was like, well, you have a long ways to go, baby, before you're anywhere near the quality of Accenture. But as a coach for my prompts and for my assistant, I could actually get the parts that I didn't like doing into a slide that was a combination of both of us working together. And that is really, I think, the nuance of if you just allow AI to go off and do its own thing, it's not always the best. When you actually work with it in order to improve it, you will get something that becomes to your standard, regardless of what your area of expertise is, right? That default of giving it over, I think it's a good starter. It allows you not to start with an empty page. It allows your brain to start really thinking very, very quickly. But it doesn't replace a human. It will never replace a human. If it does, then there's those sci-fi movies where humans are kind of, to be put into, holding cells because we're dangerous to the robots. I don't think we're going to go there. But I do think that when we abdicate our responsibility to humans and to our professions and to our practices to just let AI do it, I don't think that's the right way either.
I'm curious what your take is on everything we're reading about, survey after survey showing that among the general population, something like 2/3 of the population don't like AI. They're afraid of it. It's going in the wrong direction for all kinds of reasons. And this is a general lack of acceptance. So I don't know what that survey looks like in the business world. I would imagine that among most of the workers who are not in management, it's probably similar. And I would imagine as you get further up the management scale and up to the C-suite level, that's where the shift happens, and that probably most of C-suite see opportunity and not fear and replacement and all that stuff. What's your take on how should a company mitigate that? Because ostensibly any company who is hiring employees are hiring mostly employees from that 2/3 who are against AI and the progress of it, yet they need to get employees on board who hopefully are not going to come into the company and try to sabotage all the AI projects, but they're going to be on board with it. So what are your thoughts on how businesses should be mitigating that that conflict of opinion on something that is so instrumental in determining the future of business?
It's Isn't that the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
So that HCL tech report actually showed the opposite, is that it's often the CEO and the board which are the biggest impediments. So because they don't really understand. When I look at, Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, managing directors now can't become a managing director unless they have deep knowledge and understanding of how AI works, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's the right path, right? You have to really live and breathe it to be able to understand where it excels and where it doesn't, and which tools are, better suited for, customization for whatever your scenarios are in your organization. Oftentimes you will see that it's a Gen X are like they're either like, this is cool because they've had that curiosity mindset all of their career. The millennials and the Gen Z, millennials are probably a little bit more apprehensive sometimes because it's usually their jobs now that are at the level they're in with their career is the area that they believe that, organizations, if you look at Meta recently, they're trying to clear out that middle management, Amazon. I'm not sure that that's the right thing. It's really dangerous because they're usually the glue, right? And if you ask AI to be a glue, it comes back with tell me more, right? Because it doesn't know how to do that. So that director level where they've got lots of capability and they've proven success. There was one project I heard recently where a senior director was, in charge of creating a agentic call center. Sounds super exciting. And all of their, the team were, early in their career and they were eager to do this. But when you actually listened to the stakeholder owner, she didn't have enough buy-in above her. So if it worked, it was great. Everybody was going to take like, wahoo, right? We're all successful. If she did pull it off, because she had been there long enough, she would know that there was going to be all kinds of friction up that food chain that she was going to have to navigate. And that blocks of what are the call center responses going to be and what's the legal liability if it gets it wrong? What happens if it shares banking information that's mine that's going to you, right? Like that's a big risk for the integrity and safety of that organization. So not having that senior level support in more than just, I think we should do it, but really in, we need to do this, right? And having that feeling that you were safe. She was left very exposed and vulnerable. Great if she wins, a disaster for her career if she fails. Remember, 50% of them are going to fail, if not more. So your now stable career for your family and your life are now at risk because maybe there isn't really enough safeguards that the shareholders, who are often the silent but very strong, especially in a publicly traded company, if they are not buying what you're selling, they're selling your stock. And that's where that middle management is really trying to struggle of how to be the glue. And I don't believe that AI knows how to be a good glue yet.
Deb, I have so much more I wanted to ask you and get your thoughts on, among them the metaverse. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to do a part two somewhere down the line, if that's good with you.
I would love
And
that.
all right, and let's wrap this up with our final traditional question here on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you could put one message on a billboard for all the business owners and fractionals to read as they drive by it on the highway of life every single day, what would that message be?
Human architecture is the success of all projects.
Human architecture is the success of all projects.
Yeah, you need to know what your people are going to do. It's not the strategy, it's not the technology, it's the people. They can sabotage it, they can advocate, they can own it, At the end of the day, it's the people that make the difference.
All right, we're going to end on that note. To our listeners and viewers, if today's insights brought you value, if you loved what you listened to today, show us some love. Hit the subscribe and like button wherever you're listening or watching. And Debbie, thank you so much for joining us here on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. That's
a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.